Welcome to MBK Lounge, everybody. I am so excited that you tuned back in today. And this show is going to be a little different. Now, you might be wondering, what do you mean, Greg? What do you mean by different? Oh, yeah, by the way, Greg Nicholson, the host. It's different because this is the first show that is a part two. By popular demand, by inquiry, we said, you know what, we can't stop this discussion. So let me tell you what that discussion was. It was about strength through fire. It was overcoming a situation or situations in life where you fought through, you were able to overcome it. And it was based on a book called Triumph: Life on the Other Side of Trials, Transplants, Transition, and Transformation. Sound familiar? So I don't want to keep you waiting. Yes, he's here again. My friend, my frat, my number, Mr. Greg Works, the author. What's going on, man?
Hey, thank you. How you doing? Man. I appreciate you calling me back, man.
Hey, look, man, we try to give what the people ask for. So let me just share an excerpt, and I did this the last time we were together. It was a comment about Greg. Here it is. It says, based on his trials fighting polycystic kidney disease, he is very well equipped to tell the story of how to overcome adversity to triumph. He does this with a roadmap he developed to be victorious in securing an organ twice for kidney transplants. His story is far-reaching as it provides insights into how to successfully battle a health challenge. That's you, man.
That's me.
So last time we were together, we talked a lot about, what you went through up front. You were exercising, you were working out, you were doing all the stuff that you should do in life, right, to be fit. And then you were presented with a crisis. And so let's, kind of start there a little bit. Give us a little bit of what you went through with your first transplant. And then we'll talk a little bit about, your family and your job and those kind of things. Kind of bring us back up to speed from last time.
Well, naturally, with my first transplant, it's a shock whenever you learn. It was a shock when I learned that I actually had the health challenge.
Right.
So that's the first thing that really hit me. But I always believed I could beat it. I always believed, based on my exercise regimen, just my whole thought process and everything that I was actually doing. Mm-hmm. But when I learned that I needed a kidney, when they came back to me and said, we think you would be a good candidate for a kidney transplant, that's when my eyes really opened wide.
Right.
And I sat back, I looked at this, I kind of took it in. And at the time, there were so many different things going on. My job was the company I was working for was in financial straits. We were in the process of going under. I had just learned a couple of weeks prior to that my wife was pregnant with our first child. So with those two major events taking place, and then you're sitting there, I sit down with the transplant team and they tell me it's going to cost anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 to get a transplant. I'm trying to figure out, well, how am I going to feed my family? Am I going to get a transplant? Am I going to get a kidney? How are all these different things going to take place? But at the end of the day, I knew that God was always with me.
Yeah.
I knew that God was always with me. And I also knew that no matter what happened, that all of this had been orchestrated and I was going to get through this thing. But the other calming factor in the midst of all of this is my mother. And just sitting back and watching what she had done, going through when she had her transplant. I didn't even really know it was all happening.
Right.
But just her whole demeanor all the way up until she passed away, where she just followed the roadmap. Whatever the doctor asked her to do, she wouldn't get upset when all these different obstacles and things were thrown at her. She would just take these things one at a time.
Okay, Greg. See, you so smooth, right? That the cliffhanger in terms of why you are here a second time, you just glossed over it. You talked about kidney transplant, baby coming. I mean, all these things. And then your mother, you watched her, but then she passed. Talk a little bit about that. And that added to everything you just shared. I mean, your mom was a warrior through her kidney situation. And then you had to deal with her passing. So talk a little bit about that.
When my mother passed, it was a shock. We knew that she was having challenges, but those challenges she was having challenges with her kidney. They had removed one of her other kidneys, and she was going on dialysis. But
exactly where you were, and I want to make sure. And where were you in your journey when she was going through that? I want to make sure that we kind of have those timelines clear.
I was early on in my journey.
Okay,
I was early on. I would say I was doing well as I thought it, but the doctors could already sense that things were not happening as they were happening.
Okay.
But at the time, there was no focus or concerns on me.
Got you. Okay.
Focus was just, everything was all on my mother. And just seeing what she was going through in terms of, she would go to the doctor and they were trying to get, they got the fistula and they're trying to put the needle in her arm and they can't find the vein and all these sorts of things. And she had been losing weight. So all these things were happening over a period of time, but we never believed that she was going to pass. It wasn't like we were all sitting around a bed saying, woe is me, woe is me. What happened was she went in to dialysis. She had an exchange that was actually done, and that's what they call them, exchanges. Okay. And when she did the exchange, she stood up and she collapsed. And then they tried to bring her back, and they couldn't bring her back. When I get this phone call from my father, I'm sitting at my desk at home, get this phone call from my father, and he says, Greg, your mom's heart stopped beating. And you look around and say, well, what does that mean? You didn't say she died. You said her heart stopped beating. What's happening? So I'm just kind of listening and trying to take this all in. I'm just like, wow, let me gather myself. And about 5 minutes later, I called him. I said, look, man, I'm on my way. And I shot straight to the hospital. I hadn't probably gotten 10 minutes, have been gone for 10 minutes from my house. My father called me and told me we lost her. And I'm just sitting here, as I'm driving in a state of a shock, trying to get to the hospital to see what was going on. I get there. She's there. He's there. I can't recall if my sister was there or not, but it was just, I'm not going to say mass confusion, but we were just trying to understand what had actually transpired, And essentially what we believe happened is when you go through an exchange, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take fluid, the fluids that are actually in you are kind of off your body. And we believe the exchange was too aggressive. As such, they took off too much. So when she stood up, that's the reason why she collapsed. One of the things I'll tell you, because I know from experience, is that when you go through an exchange, one thing happens is your blood pressure goes down.
Right.
It drops. That's right. Because I experienced that when I was doing my training, when I was doing peritoneal. I was sitting there in the office and I got up and I was kind of wobbly when I got up.
Right.
But that's because it was too much for me at that particular time.
See, and so Greg, what the story you just told is why we knew you had to come back, because when we spoke last, we talked about your mom passing, but there was no context. So if I'm watching right now, I'm saying, wait a second. His mom passed before he was fully diagnosed. That means...
So I was diagnosed.
But you hadn't gone through...
I had my first transplant.
So
I was like 4 years in.
So you're 4 years in. Okay, so you're 4 years in. But either way, if I'm watching, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you just saw your mom pass. So now, okay, it's not before, it's during, right? Your mom passes. So you just said, child on the way, company going under, right? Your mom passes from a very similar situation that you're in. That changes everything, because it's one thing to get a transplant and have to go through the stuff that you were going through. It's another thing for you to be going through what your mom went through, knowing that what happened to her could happen to you.
Let me fast forward. When I learned right before my second transplant, through that process, I had gone to the doctor. I hadn't gone to. I went into the doctor just to get this procedure, not a procedure done, but I was having some blood taken, and one of the things I had to do was go get these shots. They said we were trying to increase my red blood cell count, and I went in, and your blood pressure has to be at a certain level. Well, my blood pressure was off the charts, okay? So I couldn't get, I could not get the shot. And they told me, said, Mr. Works, you got to bring it down. And my blood pressure is a stroke level. It was the top number was over 200.
Oh, my goodness.
The other number was close to 100. And we just waited for about an hour. Still didn't go down. And I landed in the emergency room, okay? So go into the emergency room, and the nurse comes in and says, Mr. Works, you got two things going on. They say, one, your blood pressure is at a level that we're concerned about, but don't worry about it because we're going to be able to bring that down. She said, my concern is your creatinine level is at 5.8, okay, which is through the charts. And I knew then that they were going to tell me that I had to go on dialysis. Okay. So they started talking to me about dialysis. And I said, well, how do you do that? We said, well, we can just do it right, kind of like right now. It's like, we're not doing dialysis. Because my concern and my fear was what had happened to my mother.
Exactly.
Okay? And the number kept on creeping up. 5'8", 5'9", 6'1", 6'2". And I was in the hospital for like 3-4 days. And then I ended up, they let me out, went home, but I knew then that I was going to have to go on dialysis. So we needed to learn the best method of me going on dialysis. And that's when I decided that I wanted to go on peritoneal versus going into a center 3 times a week, 4 hours at a time, and having them stick me and do it that way versus me doing it at home, because that process, when you go in, is much more aggressive than you doing it at home at night every day.
So, okay. So I think we have a as best we can, an understanding of all that was going on. Because last time we closed with you going through what you've gone through. And even I, as I sit here and have read the book, trying to make sure I understand, because there's so much happening. Like, at what point did this happen or that happen? So talk about how you went about getting a kidney. Because when I read that process, I didn't know that was the process, right? So now all that's going on, you have to get a kidney. Talk a little bit about how you were able to do that.
The way I approached getting a kidney, when they came to me and told me that I needed a transplant, and the best way to get a transplant is, well, not the best way, but they both shared with me it was important that we go get a live donor. Mm-hmm. And the reason they wanted me to get a live donor is because getting a live donor, the average life of a kidney is longer than it is from a cadaver. Someone had been deceased.
Okay. I do recall that.
That's the first. So I was focused on getting a live donor. When I initially looked out to see who would be candidates, I recognized real quickly I couldn't do this with members of my family, because on my father's side, my father was the youngest of 12, okay? Mm-hmm. So all of my first cousins were older, and they had their own health challenges. Yeah. And I looked at my mother's side and recognized a number of them were dealing with the kidney disease. So I couldn't focus on them. So then after that, I looked at my wedding party.
Right.
And once I looked at my wedding party and other close friends, I started asking them to go ahead and move forward with it. And that, explain to them the situation, explain to them that in order for me to live a normal life, I was going to have to get a kidney transplant. Would they be willing to donate? And if they donated, even though they had one kidney, they would not have an impact on the way they actually live.
So, Greg, so again, it's funny, as someone who has not been in your shoes, you just said you called people that you knew and said, hey, can I have your kidney? You know what kind of courage you have to have? Like, what did you do? What did you say to call somebody and ask them for, not to borrow a couple of dollars, not to get a ride to the store? You asked them for a part of them. And then some people said no.
So this is the way my approach was, and I sat down with the folks from Johns Hopkins to do that. Some people like to do it like that, like you said. Hey, I need a kidney. Would you get tested? But what I essentially, the way I actually tried to set this thing up was setting the scenario and says, hey, look, I need a kidney transplant, and in order for me, the best way for me to get treated for this kidney transplant is for me getting a live donor. So I'm coming to you asking you, would you donate? Would you be willing to get tested to see whether or not you are matched or compatible, to see whether or not I could use you to actually give me a kidney transplant? I said, this is the only way I'm going to have the opportunity to live a normal life. I said, based on this process, they're not going to allow you to donate the kidney to me if it's going to hinder your ability to live a normal life. So right now what's happening is you're going to check and see it, and you have the opportunity to check to see what's happening on your end, and then that will determine whether or not it happens to me. Now, the other thing is you're going to have to go through a series of tests. But let me just say this. Before you get tested, I said, what I need you to do is sit down with your wife or your husband, significant other, and pray with them that God will cover you and God will allow you to get tested. Because what I don't want to do is have any rift in the midst of your family. The biggest challenge that I saw was having someone say, hey, look, I want to do this. They get tested. They're good. We're down the path. And then somebody says, you know what? I can't do this. Or I don't want to do this because my wife says this, or my husband says that. Interesting enough, of the 3 people I had, one of my female friends that was actually compatible, she had told her wife, she had told her husband, and she told her mom, said, it doesn't matter what y'all say. If Greg needs this kidney, I'm going to give him this kidney, Right. And that's just how our relationship was. Now, she wasn't the best fit, so I didn't have to use her, but that's just an example of what could potentially happen.
So earlier, you talked about the different challenges that you had. Some challenges, some things that were exciting. And one of the things was with your job, right? So obviously when you're going through the fire, right, like you said, how am I going to feed my family? You're working for a company that's about to go under. So how did you navigate that part of your life?
Well, when I had my first one, I had a coach. So I had a former boss that I had that just open dialogue. He was my boss, but actually we had become real good friends. And I could sit down and talk to him about how to actually approach this thing. The first thing he shared with me is don't say anything to anybody until right before you need to get the transplant. So that was the first thing he told me. The second thing he shared with me as it relates to that is you work in an environment where your compensation is actually based on sales. So based on that, what you don't want to do is have the company take you off that business and give it to somebody else. While you're working these deals. It's not like you're not going to work up until the point that you have the transplant. So I followed his lead as it relates to that. I knew how long I was going to be out. We talked about this being on short-term, disability. So I was good with that. I'd already spoken to the insurance people. And then I had a managing director that I supported that I could also talk to. So in terms of that, those two people, there were no surprises on their end. The one I didn't work with at all anymore. The other I worked directly with. So I shared that with them. I didn't share with the others that I worked directly with what was actually happening. I mean, I was with these guys on Friday. And on Monday, I was gone.
So it sounds like you sought support. Like you went to other people in your life that you knew that you could trust, seek counsel. So that's one of the ways that I think I hear you saying that you were able to navigate at work. It sounds like when it came to getting a kidney, you know, Johns Hopkins gave you different. Again, you're seeking counsel, you're getting advice, you're going to people who will give you. The other thing that you mentioned was you gave advice for somebody else to talk to their family, right?
Absolutely.
Which is all about support. And you talk in your book about support. So obviously that's something that everybody's going to need if they're going through the fire. So talk a little bit about how you garnered support, what support looked like for you so that people can kind of get a feel for, I don't have to go through this alone.
Well, one of the things I have, one person that I actually talk to all the time was I had a prayer partner. It's a brother that I actually prayed with a couple times a week. So I knew that I could communicate with him amongst, and this is somebody that was not in like my inner circle.
Right.
So we could have real dialogue as it relates to the support from that perspective. The second thing is I had support from the family. You know, my mother had already gone through this. So I knew I had somebody that I could talk to as it relates to this, that could kind of guide me through this. The third is I had another brother, another fraternity brother, had gone through this. At the time, I think he had 2 or 3 transplants at the time, but he could sit down and walk me through what happened to him. And he had his first transplant at 24 years old. So he had shared with me how he went about getting a kidney. He shared with me how whenever I had different challenges, he shared with me what impacts that, you know, things that actually happened to him. He shared with me when I was going through, after having the transplant and a medication I was having problems with, I called him and he told me, hey, I had problems with the same medication. This is the dialogue that I had with my doctors because I was trying to get the doctors to pull it out. Today, if you look at my medical records, it says I'm allergic to that medication. But he gave me that insight. The other thing he sat down and talked to me about is, hey, look, what's important? And he put these things in order, you know, and we sit back and we say, you know, God first, family second, job third. And he said, you know, you got to rearrange all that stuff. He said, look, Greg, he said, first person on this thing should be you. Because if it's you, if it's no you, then there's no family. There's no job. It's you first, God second, family third. And I sat back and I had to embrace that and sit back and say, hey, look, you know what? That's real.
What's interesting is that if I'm watching and I'm listening to you talk and you mention how you went to people, that means you had to have people before the situation. You know what I mean? Like you can't, it's hard to be in the fire, right? And then you got to go find people. And some people may have to do that, right? That's all of a sudden. But what I hear you saying is that we need to surround ourselves with the kind of people who we could trust, who maybe know a little bit more, could give us some counsel, give us different views. And I see you nodding, right? It's like you being in it and trying to do that as much as, go ahead, speak to this.
My mother told me that she was never concerned about me being able to get a kidney. She said, I know that somebody is going to step up and give you a kidney. And that was because of what you're saying right here.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I do have a broad network.
Right.
And I carry myself as such that people would want to help me when I'm in need. But if you don't operate like that, then you may have some challenges.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to be able to get a kidney, but a lot of it, make yourself available for other people.
Right.
You know, and I always believe as I sit back and look through this is this could have happened to anyone. For whatever reason, God chose me to go through this, not once, but to go through this twice. And he's also challenged me to tell the story and tell people how to go about it, how they need to approach it, and sit back. And as I sit back and think all the different things, this has never been about me, but it's about me sharing with others the things that happened because he knew I would share it.
Right. Because that's ultimately what it was about. It wasn't for you to die. It was for you to be able to open the light or share a light for people to really see. It's funny you mentioned your mom, and I thought you were going to mention this, but I'll mention it to you to remind you. It was in chapter 11. I think last time I talked about chapter 9 when it laid out all the things that was happening in your life, and I mentioned your mom passing, and it was like that's the first time we mentioned it, right? But in chapter 11, it's called "Life Forever Changed." And I thought that was very powerful. And you talk about how you say there is a checklist of things that happen before, during, and after the transplant process. And I will discuss them in this chapter. I was certainly was better prepared for my kidney transplant the second time because I had already experienced it once before. But you said, this is the quote. However, one factor unsettled me for a long time. The reality that my life was forever changed. What were you thinking about when you mentioned that? Do you recall kind of where your headset was when you made that statement?
When I sit back and say my life had been forever changed, a couple of different things. One, we never anticipated my mom would be gone.
No.
As she departed us. So that was the first thing. My children did not have the opportunity to grow up with their paternal grandmother, that would have been able to pour into them. My one child was 4, my second was 2. My mother passed away 2 weeks before, like a week before my youngest daughter turned 3. And I just kept on looking at the door. I knew that she was going to walk through that door.
Yeah.
And I knew. And that's when it became real to me.
Yeah.
So you sit back and say life was forever changed. The other thing that I will say when I say life was forever changed for me is, hey, the way I go about things is going to be different always. I'm going to be on medication for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to monitor myself all the time. Not only what I eat, but what I drink and all the different things that I'm going to do. I need to be a vessel for other people and share with them this story with others. So when I'm saying that my life is forever changed, that's what I'm looking at. The other thing you're looking at is kind of the transformation, When I look at the transformation piece,
which is a chapter in the book.
Yeah, I look at the transformation piece and I sit back and look and said, hey, look, you know what? I've gone from a person that, things happen, but now I seek things, I seek to give, of my time and supporting others. I seek to give from the standpoint, the resources that I give, and I'm giving to nonprofits and different charities. I seek to always empathize with somebody given the situation that they're going through, because maybe I didn't know what they're going through, but I know a little something about going through something. And I think that I can shed some light on what's actually happening. When I'm in the midst of the fire, what's going on, I never really get too down. And that's because I can go back to how I went about getting my kidney and how I've been able to fight through this. When I sit back and look at what's happening on the job, from the standpoint that, hey, look, you know what? We're not getting any business, or this isn't going to happen, or that's not happening. It's like, you know what? Don't worry, it's going to be okay. You're going to get there at some point in time. So for me, transformation is about my mind. It's about my resources. It's about my body. All of those different things, and trying to be an impact player, at the end of the day.
So I know we can't talk about everything in the book because I do want everybody to get the book, and we're going to make sure they have the title when we're done. But you just said something that made me find a page. As you can see, I got all kinds of notes over here. And it talks about protecting my gift. Because what you just talked about is all the things that you reflect on and remember and that you're doing. But there's also an accountability. You have a responsibility to what God gave you, right? And so talk a little bit about that, because that's one of the things that people need to realize, I think, is that when you're going through something, through the fire, and you're able to go through it, you have a responsibility to some things, which you just mentioned. You're talking to people, the nonprofits or whatever. But here you're talking about, I believe that protecting my kidney the best way I know how is key to enduring a successful new organ experience. And I would say even more than that, potentially. But talk a little bit about that.
When I think about protecting my kidney, I look at this as being the gift from God. As well as the person that actually donated that kidney. The other thing I look at is the fact that I got this opportunity for a second chance or maybe a third chance. I'm not going to squander it by doing things that are careless and being careless with that particular kidney. And there have been so many things that have happened since that time. It can be what you drink. It can be what you eat. Clearly, it was all about COVID. Because when COVID was here, I mean, I am with pre-existing conditions, people were dying every day.
Right.
And it's important that I don't put myself in arm's length of those things. Do I even need to be in crowds, big crowds? This summer, I went to an event, 3,000 people. Okay. 2 days in a row. The third day, I was at home sick in bed, Did I need to be amongst all of those people with all those germs being there?
Right.
There's some places I really don't need to go to or be at, I remember people in my face,
Right.
So when I say protecting my gift, it's about being smart. My gift is my gift to these organs.
Right.
So I got to be smart about what I do, where I go, all the time, The other thing is we sit back and they're small things, but big things. You sit back and look at, do I get enough sleep? Did I get drink? Do I hydrate? Do I get enough water? These are all things that are protecting my gift.
Right.
And I don't always do it,
Right.
My sisters and I were talking about this. Well, we were texting back and forth. One of my sisters, I'm not going to say the name, but you know them both.
Yeah.
They're both 2 kidney transplant recipients, okay? And one of them on Wednesday had surgery to have her 2 native kidneys removed because she was having challenges with those kidneys, okay? Because what happens, they continue to grow.
Right.
We have polycystic kidney disease, so that means there are cysts that may grow on the kidney.
Right.
And she had both of those removed, but surgery went well. She's doing well.
Awesome.
But her creatinine level went down.
Right.
I mean, down. I mean, significantly from where it wasn't like it was bad. It was good before, but where she is now, I'm sitting there like, that's off the charts where your numbers are.
Wow.
But I sit back and look at that. But one of the things we talked about was hydration. They were like, well, how much water do you drink every day? And I'm sitting there like, I got to do better.
Right.
The other thing is, okay, you're hydrating, but does drinking alcohol help? No. Does drinking caffeine or Coke or tea, not tea, but coffee, does that help?
Right.
No.
Caffeinated stuff.
Caffeinated things.
Yeah.
You got to look. So that's what I'm talking about when I say protecting your gift.
Yeah. So Greg, listen, I know when you were here before, I wanted you to close with, just some final thoughts, and we'll do the same thing today. But obviously, we ultimately, people should get the book, and I'll read the title again. But anything that you want to share, kind of in your final thoughts just based on all of this discussion that you want people to walk away with? You've shared a lot already, but anything else that you would want to say, hey, this is how you can go through the fire. This is what helped me, or the floor is yours.
Let me give you a few points here. First and foremost, don't let the moment overwhelm you. And what I mean by that is, it may be a health challenge. It may be a job situation. Somebody you know may have passed away, okay? Mm-hmm. Don't let it overwhelm you, you know? Sit back, look at it, and embrace it, you know? You got to embrace that piece. Second is, you got a challenge in front of you. You got to develop a plan. Develop a plan, develop a roadmap. If you don't know how to go about it, get help. Somebody will help you develop your roadmap, okay? The third thing is, let's jump on this immediately. This is time sensitive, okay? Mm-hmm. In business, it's about money, you know. In health, it could be about life, you know. In school, it could be about turning a bad grade into a good grade. Let's jump on this thing immediately. The fourth thing is, God is the foundation of all of this. Mm-hmm. God has got to be in the midst of what is actually going on. For me, it was about praying. It was like having people praying with me and for me. Mm-hmm. And other things that are happening, and you've seen it recently, the election. The election.
I know you got not going down that route.
You know, you sit back and say, how'd this happen? And as I sit back, or it could be the job situation. Mm-hmm. Things could be going wrong, you know?
Right.
And you sit back and say, hey, look, you know what? As you reflect, say, God is in the midst of all of this, okay? Mm-hmm. I had this conversation with a friend of mine about the election. And I said, where was God in the middle of this? You know what his response was? He said, when you read the Bible, don't you hear about the evil kings? Don't you look at all the different things that happened? When you look at Jesus, when Judas betrayed him, God was in the middle of that whole thing, because we had to get to the prophecy. So we don't necessarily know where this thing is going to land,
right?
But we definitely know that God is in the middle of this thing,
right?
So God has got to be your foundation in the midst of this, okay?
Right.
So people, if he's not, you need to get him in your life.
That's right.
And get him in the midst of what's happening. And the last thing I will say about this book is, I went through a whole lot of things, but I think that to make it complete, there are 2 donor testimonials in here. Those donor testimonials, to me, say it all. The one young man shares, they both share how they got to the point of donating the organ to me. But the fact of the matter is, the one person is living a normal life, you know, he's fine. If he was actually to have a health challenge as it relates to this and needed a kidney, they would put him at the top of the list. He would end up getting a transplant probably within 2 months.
Wow.
Quick, okay?
Right.
The second was from a cadaver person. The person actually died. They kept him on life support long enough to actually get the organs to me. But that family gladly gave me a kidney. The thing that's interesting about it, as their son was passing away, he was an organ donor. The fact that he passed away is saved probably anywhere from 4 to 8 other lives, okay? 2 kidneys, liver, heart, you know, all of these different things. Mm-hmm. And it's important that you look at all of these different things, you know, but I think that they had a story to tell as well. But those are really the 5 things that I think. Don't let the moment overwhelm you. Develop a plan. It's time sensitive. Get on it. God is the foundation. And the third thing is the donor testimonials.
Greg, man, listen, now I know why everybody wanted you to come back. So glad you were willing to come back and finish the story.
Hey, thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for your time.
Hey, anytime, man. If you want to bring me back again, I'll come back again.
So, hey, look, man, if that's what the people want, that's what they're going to get. Again, Listen, everybody, the name of the book is Triumph, Life on the Other Side of Trials, Transplants, Transition, and Transformation by Gregory S. Works. We talked about a lot, but there's a lot of information in here because this was all about finding strength through the fire. And guess what? This is a roadmap that can help you if you're going through anything. It's not just about having a situation with kidney. This applies to any kind of situation that you can go through. So thanks for tuning in. Be blessed and see you next time.